Hi and welcome to FreeDU Hub. Today we'll try to understand some basic concept about enterprise security and enterprise networks. So we'll be working on routing and DMZ today, and in today's lab we'll use the virtualized environment, which is Cyber Range in Champlain College. As you can see that I'm using multiple virtual machines over here. All of them are Linux based. We'll be configuring them. We'll try to understand that how can we route the traffic between the networks. To configure all this, we'll be using our WAN, we'll be using LAN, and we'll be using a DMZ. Just to give you an idea, that's the mission that we have today. We have our virtual machines over here. This is us as a student. We'll be connecting to the machines, which is log and web server. We'll be sending the logs over here. We'll have to connect to the LAN, and then we'll have to configure our firewall over here. And we'll have our Road Warrior server, Road Warrior workstation over here, which would be connected to our WAN. So we'll be building a secure routed network, and our goal is to configure the Road Warrior, which is RW01. It would be used as a firewall today to manage the traffic between the WAN, LAN, and DMZ. Then we'll deploy a Web01 and Log01 in the DMZ zone, and then we'll implement a routing on net firewall rules and logging, etc., to secure the network. So since we are doing it in an academic environment in the college, all students have their own IP addresses and the username and passwords in order to log into these computers. So if you're my student and you're following it, please refer to the IP addresses and ranges that we have provided you for your specific virtual machines. Now, before we'll start, it is really important to document all your work. Many of the commands and configuration used in this lab will be repeated throughout this course. So it's highly recommended to create a tech journal, maintain your notes, use GitHub or anything, so that if we are proceeding with other labs and exercises, you know what were the problems that you faced and how you manage those problems. Now, let's start it with our Road Warrior 1. And if we are starting with our Road Warrior 1 server, just make sure that you are going to the network settings of it and check that if your network adapter is facing your WAN network. If it's not facing the WAN network, you might not be able to route the traffic well. So first select that, press OK, and start your virtual machine. As you can see, we are logged into our Road Warrior server. Now, the first thing that we would do is that we'll have to change the password, because changing password or changing the default password is a fundamental security practice to prevent any unauthorized access. So if you want to change the password, we'll type in a command password and we'll press enter, and then we'll enter the current password and the new password. And now enter the new password and enter the new password. So now it has successfully updated the password. Now the next step is that we'll have to add a new pseudo user. So we'll create a new privileged user account with my name. Now, using a separate privileged user account instead of the root would reduce the security risk and would follow the principles of least privilege. So in order to do that, we'll type in sudo, and then we'll type in add user, and I'll type in my name, and then it's asking for a password. So as you can see that I have added a new user called Syed. Now we'll have to add this new account user Syed to the sudo account. So in order to do that, we'll type in a command called sudo usermod and then -a and g and then sudo Syed and press enter. So now that account has been added to the sudo user account. Now the next thing is that we'll have to change the host name of this specific server. As you can see, I have typed in a command host name. So current host name of this server is Ubuntu server, but we need to name it differently so that we can distinguish the servers. Now in order to rename the server, we are typing in a command called sudo hostname ctl and then set hostname Road Warrior 01 -Syed. And if we'll check the host name now, as you can see, the host name of the server has been changed to Road Warrior 01 -Syed. Now the reason why we are changing the host name here is that with the correct host name, we'll ensure that accurate logging would make possible, like on the log server itself, it will be able to identify the system in network monitoring and any messages through the logger which would be received at the log server. Next step is that we'll have to configure the network, and in order to configure the network, first of all, we'll type in IPA to know the interface actually which we need to configure. Now you'll have to check this one, that what is the interface name in your case. In my case, it's ENS 160, sometimes it is ENS 192. So it's recommended to check this first before proceeding. So once that's checked, now we'll try to edit the network configuration file. So in order to enter the network configuration, I'm using netplan. So in order to execute it, you'll type in sudo nano etc netplan01-netconfig.yaml. It would open an interface like this, and now we'll enter the network details here. Now you'll type the address like this. Now make sure that here in this starting, you're not using any spaces. Instead, you'll be using tabs. But once you'll be entering these details over here, you can use a space. So if there is any space used in the starting of the addresses over here, it would throw an error over there. Once that, you can do Control X, and then you'll type in sudo netplan apply and press enter. So that address would be saved over here. Now we'll ping and see if we can access the internet on this one or not. And as you can see, we are getting a response. It means that it is configured and it has access to the internet. If you would like to see the settings in the graphical user interface, you can click Edit Connections over here. Click on your netplan ENS60 as we checked earlier, and then click on Settings, and you'll be able to see the IP4 addresses and rest of the things over here. Just note down that at the moment we haven't defined any routes on this one other than the basic default gateway and stuff. We'll be working on it shortly, but at the moment, as you can see, it's connected and we can even access the internet. So everything is here good so far. Now that's all what we'll be doing in the Road Warrior server at the moment. Now we'll try to configure our firewall, which is a Vyos router, and we'll be configuring the three interfaces on that, which is WAN, DMZ, and LAN. So now we'll be configuring our Firewall 01, but we'll be using Vyos on this one. It's a fully functional but console-based network compliance and is the favorite among the networking and security professionals. Today we are going to deal with it as a router. We'll work on it as a firewall sometime later, but at the moment we'll just try to configure it so that we can route the traffic with the three different networks, and we'll be configuring WAN, DMZ, and LAN for this one. So before we'll fire up this server, we'll have to make sure that we have the appropriate settings for different interface cards which are there on this one. As you can see, we have only two interfaces over here. We'll have to add another network adapter over here. So the network adapter number one would be linked to our WAN. So just make sure that you're selecting it to the WAN, and I'll select it from here. For the second adapter, we need to configure it for DMZ. So we'll browse it and we'll select our DMZ in this one and click OK. And for the third one, we need to connect it to LAN. So we'll browse and we'll connect it to LAN. Press OK. Make sure that it is, first of all, the first adapter is going to WAN, then DMZ, and then LAN. Press OK and fire up your Vyos server. So we are logged into our Vyos server, and first of all, what we'll have to do, as we did earlier, we'll go in configure mode, and in this one we'll have to set up the host name first. So in order to do that, we'll set system, and then we'll type in host name, and we'll name it as firewall 01-Syed, and press enter. And just make sure that whenever you are making any changes, you'll have to commit and save it. So now if we'll check the host name of this one, we can see it's firewall 01-Syed. Now we want to see the interfaces which are there on our Vyos server. So in order to do that, we'll type in show interfaces and press enter. So we can see that there are three interfaces: Ethernet 0, Ethernet 1, and Ethernet 2. Now, in order to make sure that we can correctly identify these interfaces, we'll have to name them, that Ethernet 0 could be our WAN, Ethernet 1 could be our DMZ, and Ethernet 2 could be our LAN. So in order to do that, we'll type in the following commands. So we'll type in set interface Ethernet 0 description as sec350 WAN, and then Ethernet 1 as say a DMZ, and the third one is Ethernet 2, which with the description as say a LAN. Now again, we'll commit, and sorry, it was cap. We'll commit and we'll save it, and then we'll check show interfaces and press enter. So now you can see that it has named the interfaces as we told, that sec350 WAN, DMZ, and LAN. Now the next step is that we'll have to assign IP addresses to these. So in order to assign the IP addresses, we'll be passing in the following commands. As you can see, I have defined the IP addresses for our Ethernet 0 as 10.0.1710, and then Ethernet number 1 and Ethernet number 2, and as usual we are going to commit the changes on this one. So we'll type in commit and we'll type in save now, and we'll again type in show interfaces and press enter. So now you can see that we have the appropriate IP addresses for our WAN, DMZ, and LAN. Further, if we'll exit from the configure mode now and we'll type in show interfaces and press enter, you'll be able to see clearly that we have our interfaces as Ethernet 0, 1, and 2. Next step is that we need to define the gateway and DNS. So sec350 WAN interface on firewall number 1 would need to be informed that how to get out of the internet or to access the internet. So we will set both the default gateway and DNS server to sec350 gateway firewall at 10.0.17.2. So in order to do that, we'll have to go to configure mode again and press enter, and now we'll configure a static route over here. Now as you can see that I have defined the static route as 0.0.0.0, and our next hop is 10.0.17.2, and then we are setting the name server as 10.0.17.2, again to remind you that the default route would allow the firewall 01 to send the traffic to internet, and the DNS server would enable the domain name resolution over here. So once that's done, we'll commit again and we'll save the changes. Type in save and press enter. So that's done now. Now since our firewall is routing traffic between LAN, WAN, and DMZ, we must configure NAT, which would allow the devices in the DMZ to access the internet. Now we'll be setting up a DNS forwarding, which would allow the devices in the DMZ to resolve the domain names, etc. So in order to do that, we'll first of all start with the configuring NAT for DMZ to WAN traffic, and then we'll be doing a DNS forwarding. So in order to configure the NAT for DMZ to WAN, we'll pass in the following commands. Now as you can see, I have defined the NAT source rule and I gave it a description as NAT from DMZ to WAN. Then we are setting up a rule for the outbound interface, which is Ethernet 0, and then we'll giving a source address and the translation address. Now NAT ensures that the internal DMZ IP addresses can access the WAN, and then masquerade rule would dynamically translate the private DMZ IP addresses from firewall WAN IP address, which is 10.0.17.110 when it's going out to the internet. So once that's done, we'll type in commit over here and we'll save it. Let me type in commit and I'll type save over here. So that configuration has been saved. Now we'll be working DNS forwarding, which would enable the DNS forward to allow DMZ host to resolve the host names. So in order to do that, we'll be typing in the following commands. Now, as you can see, I'm setting the DNS service DNS forwarding listen address to 172.16.15.2. Then I'm setting the service DNS forwarding allow from 172.16.50.0, and then we'll be using the set service DNS forwarding name server as 10.0.17.2. Once that done, we'll again commit and we'll save it. So now that's done. So it means that our firewall 01 is acting as a DNS forwarder from DMZ system for web and log1. The upstream DNS server 10.0.17.2 would resolve the external domains. Without this, DMZ host can reach the internal network but cannot be able to resolve the domain names, etc. So now we'll check it. So in order to check, we'll try to ping Google and let's see if we can receive it. Packets received, transmitted, and we can see that there has been a communication on that. So these are the settings that are required on our Vyos, which is our firewall. Now we'll be configuring our Web1 server, and again we'll have to configure its interfaces first so that we can check that how Web01, which is a Rocky Web server, that should be able to be placed on DMZ network with the IP address which is defined already. It would ensure that the Web01 network adapter on the SEC350 DMZ network would be able to access the internet. Now, as you can see, we are on our DMZ and we want to configure our web server 1 so that it can route the traffic easily. So before we'll start our web server, which is Web01, we'll have to make sure that we'll have to check that if it is facing the DMZ. So we'll have to change this to our DMZ network. Click OK. OK, and now start your virtual machine. As you can see that we are successfully logged into our Web01. So since we are using the root account, we should not be using the privilege account for our regular operation. So we'll have to add a new user and we'll call it like we'll add a user and we'll call it as Syed, which is my name, and that's done. Then we'll set the password for this account. So we'll type in password for Syed and we'll enter the password. Okay, then we'll add it to user mod and then we'll type AG and then we'll use wheel over here and we'll type Syed over here. So now that's done. Now the next step is that we'll have to change the host name. So we'll type the host name CTL and then we'll set the host name to web01-Syed and now we'll check the host name and we can see that we have named the host name here as well. Next step is that we'll have to set a static route, and in order to do that we'll use the following command. We'll type in nano etc sysconfiguration network script if configuration for ENS192. Again, I'm saying pass in a command to check your interface name and press enter. Now we'll make the modifications over here to define the network. So I'll enter the following details: Ethernet, type Ethernet, and then ENS192. On boot, yes, we'll provide the IP address and we'll provide network mask and gateway and DNS. Once that's done, press Ctrl X. It would ask you to save. Press yes and enter. It would save it. After that, you'll have to restart the network manager. So in order to restart the network manager, we'll type sudo systemctl restart network manager, press start. So now that's done. It means that now it has saved that configuration. So we can pass in if config to check it, and you can see that the IP address and rest of the things has been changed over here. Now since we have the static IP address on this one, we can check the internet access on this one. Just check ping google.com and we can see a response over there. After that, We can check another thing on it, that if we can access the nearby servers or not. Rather, we can enter, we can try to ping 172.16.15.2, and we can see that we received a response on that as well. Okay, so once that's done, let's try to install and configure a web server. So for that, we'll have to type in sudo, and we'll do yum install -y and httpd and press enter. So it would ask me for my password, and it would start installing httpd. Once that's done, you'll type another command. You'll type in sudo and systemctl, and then start httpd, press enter, and then we'll type in systemctl, and then we'll enable httpd, press enter. So now we have enabled the service. Now we'll have to open the firewall ports for HTTP and HTTPS. So for that, we'll be typing in. So now we have opened the firewall ports for permanently added HTTP and HTTPS, and we reloaded it. So that's how we configure a web server so that it can route the traffic between the machines. Now it should be able to access the server which is on 172.16.15.3, and as you can see, I am pinging 172.16.15.3, so it is able to communicate with that. Now that's done. Now we'll be configuring our log server. We'll have to make sure that our log server is on DMZ. As you can see that our web server and log server are in DMZ. So we'll have to change the interface for this one, for its network adapter, to DMZ. So we'll modify it first, make sure that it is on DMZ, plus OK, and then fire up your virtual machine. So we are logged into our log server. Now, as usual, we'll first create an account with the name of Syed, which is my name, and then we'll rename the server. As you can see, I have created account user. I have changed the password for the root user account, and then I haven't added it to the wheel group. I'll do it later. And then I have changed the name of the computer to log01. That's Syed. So let's set it to the wheel account as well. So we have added Syed to the wheel account. Now it's all set. So let's try to exit, and let's try to log in as Syed. So we'll go to if config, and we can see the IP address and rest of the things on this one. As you can see that this is a new server. We haven't configured it well. So first thing we'll have to do is that we'll have to change the IP address of this one, define a static IP address. Then you can see that it's ENS192. So in order to edit the network configuration, we'll type in the following command. So we entered sudo nano etc sysconfiguration network scripts, and if config ENS192, press enter, the password for Syed account, and now we'll make the modifications in this file. So these are the details that we'll enter for the network settings, and after that press Ctrl X, save the configuration, press Y, and it would save the configuration. Now we'll type in sudo and then systemctl restart network manager. So once that's done, we'll go to if config and press enter. Now you can see the IP address and rest of the details for that interface card. If it's not updated, restart the server so that you can see the changes. And we have restarted the server, and you can see the new IP address and rest of the details are there. Further, if I would like to ping to google.com, and we can see that we can access the network on this one. So let's try to log in. So Now once that's done, we'll have to install and enable rsyslog on our log server, and in order to do that we'll type in sudo yum and then we'll install -y and type in, press enter. It would ask for the password. Now you can check the status of rsyslog by systemctl status rsyslog. Once that's done, we'll type in another command called sudo systemctl enable and enable now rsyslog, just to make sure that it's enabled as well. Now we'll have to configure the rsyslog to accept the logs. So in order to configure that, we'll type in sudo nano and we'll type etc rsyslog.configuration, press enter. Now here you might find these settings for UDP and TCP which are already available over there. If you want to type in, you can type in yourself. Otherwise, I would just uncomment the settings which are over here. Now there is a manual way of doing it as well, that if you don't want to rely on this default configuration, you can add your configuration here yourself as well. But keep a note of it that either this default configuration would be there or your configuration that you'll type in over here. If both things are over there, you'll end up having issues. So I just uncommented it. I'll save the configuration, press yes, and the configuration is saved. Once we have made the changes, we'll type in sudo systemctl and we'll restart the service of rsyslog and press enter. It would restart, and now we'll check the status of it. And in order to check the status, we'll type systemctl status rsyslog, press enter, and you can see that it is running. Next thing is that we'll have to allow syslog traffic through the firewall. So if the firewall rules must be updated to allow logging traffic, otherwise the log won't be received. So in order to do that, we'll type in the following commands. So for firewall, I'll permanently add port 514 for UDP and TCP, and then I'll reload it. Once that's done, that's all that what we'll be doing on this one. Now we'll have to configure rsyslog on firewall 01. Next step is that we'll have to configure our firewall 01. We need to enable the rsyslog forwarding from firewall 01 and web 01 to log 01. So log 01 is set up. We need to forward the logs from firewall to web and log server. So in order to configure that, we'll log into our firewall and then we'll go to the configure, and then we'll try to configure it so that the rsyslog forwarding is enabled on our firewall. So in order to do that, we are going to pass the following command. So we'll type in set system syslog host 172.16.50.5, pass it at all level, and then we'll commit and we'll save it. After that, we need to test the logging. So we need to send a log message from our firewall to our log server. So that we are typing in logger, and then we'll give the IP address of our log server with the port as 514, and we'll send a message from here. Next, we need to configure rsyslog on our web 01. So now we log into our web 01. So here we'll type in sudo yum install -y. Once that's installed, I'll pause it here and I'll go and I'll check HTTP access from Road Warrior 1 to Web 01, and we'll have to make certain changes on that. Now, as you can see that we have configured Web 01 as a web server and set it up the NAT and DNS forwarding on Firewall 01. Now we must ensure that Road Warrior 01 can reach our Web 01 in DMZ. Since as you can see that we are on our Road Warrior server, the default gateway here is 172. Let me show you over here. So as you can see, the default gateway over here is 10.17.2, which only routes the traffic out to the internet. The DMZ network, which is 172.16.50.0/29, is not reachable here from Road Warrior 1 because the default gateway does not know about it. So we'll have to manually define a static route so that our Road Warrior knows how to reach Web 01, which is 172.16.50.3 via Firewall WAN interface, which is 10.0.17.10. Now, in order to make the modifications over here, we'll have to make certain changes over here just to accommodate and to tell it that what are the routes and how to reach the server. So as you can see that I have changed the routes to 172.16.50 and I'm passing it through 10.0.17.110, and now I'll save the configurations. And we'll type in sudo net plan apply and press enter. Then we'll type in IP route show to see the route of it. So we can see this address over here, which is a static route which is defined up here. Now let's test the connectivity to Web 01 from here. So we'll ping -c 172.16.50.3 and let's have 4 pings over here, and let's see if we can reach. Yep, we can reach our Web 01 from this one. Now further, let's try to open the browser and try to check the HTTP access to Road Warrior 01. I mean from Road Warrior 01. As you can see, I entered 172.16.50.3, so we can access our web server from here. So let's move to our Web 01 and let's try to configure the RSys log on Web 01. So we have already installed our RSys log on Web 01. Now we'll edit its configuration. So we'll type the following. So we'll type sudo nano etc RSys log.d and sec350 configuration and enter the password. Now we'll add the following to the configuration. We'll type user notice at 172.16.50.5 and port 514, and we'll try to save this one and close it. Now that's done. Now we'll type in sudo and systemctl and then restart RSys log and press enter. So that would restart. So we'll type logger -p user notice test log from Web 01 to log 01 and press enter. Now this would ensure that the logs from Web 01 are forwarded to log 01 for security and auditing purposes. Now once that's done, let's implement the firewall rules for edit security. So log forwarding is configured. We must secure Firewall 01, Web 01, and log 01 by restricting the access. So in order to restrict the access, we'll implement the firewall rules here on Firewall 01. So the rules should be similar to what I'm writing over here. As you can see, I have added the rules on my firewall from WAN to DMZ with the action accept. I have defined the source address as well as I have defined the destination address, protocol TCP, and destination port as AT. So as usual, we'll commit and we'll save it. Now this rule would allow HTTP traffic from Road Warrior 01 to Web 01, but would block all other unwanted traffic which would try to come. Likewise, we'll implement a firewall rule on Web 01. So now we'll log into our Web 01 and we need to check if we have enabled the services like ports of UDP and TCP over here. So if we'll type in a command like sudo firewall cmd and list all, and you can see that it's not defined over here, so it won't be able to collect the logs which are sending or which are received on this RSys log server. So in order to do that, we are going to type in the following. So first we'll type the command to check the status of RSys log, and we can see that it's running. So then we'll type in systemctl enable now RSys log and press enter. That's done. Now we'll add the firewall rules to list all the services as we checked earlier, which were not there, and we'll have to add them over here. You cannot see TCP or UDP. So in order to do that, we'll type the following. Now as you can see that I permanently added ports for TCP and UDP over here. Then I reloaded it and I listed it all. So now you can see that port for TCP and UDP are listed here. Now we'll configure RSys log on our Web01 so that the log server can receive the logs from this server. So in order to do that, we'll type in the following. So I'll type in, and you'll be able to see the configuration that we entered in this one as user notice at 172.16.50.5 on port number 514. So we'll either use TCP or UDP over here. So you'll have to use only one. Then we sent a message through logger on user notice test from log1 from Web01 to Web01 or to log01. And as you can see, it has received the message from web2 log number 1 that we just sent from the server. Finally, we need to check if we can perform SSH testing from the Road Warrior 01. So in order to do that, I'll type in SSH, and then I'll type Sayed at 172.16.50.3 and press enter. You can type in yes over here. Seems like we are able to connect, and there you go. We have successfully logged into Web01. And if I'll exit from here, and if I would try to SSH say on 172.16.50.5 and press enter, I can connect to this one as well. And as you can see, I'm logged into log01 as well. So that was our lab on routing, and we checked that how can we have a connection between the network if we have a DMZ, LAN, and a WAN, and how can we route the traffic between the different zones, and how can we secure the network using the firewall which we have configured in today's exercise. So we have successfully managed to configure web and log servers on our DMZ, where the logs were received on our log server, and we have configured even the firewall 01 so that it is allowing certain traffic to be passed on to the respective servers. So that's it for today. I hope you learned something new. Take care. See you then. Bye-bye.